WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Praia. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. Senegalese President Diomaye Faye unveils a 5-point action plan by his government to begin economic inventory. Togolese members of parliament conclude their nationwide tour on constitutional amendment consultation despite criticisms. CSOs in Liberia calls for the speedy implementation of the War Crimes Court resolution.
It is a initial win for accountability in Liberia, especially for the excesses that have been committed over the period, especially during the civil crisis.
And Gambian President Barrow urges unity and development in aid message to citizens.
It is comforting that democracy continues to thrive. We have demonstrated it here in the Gambia and the sister republic of Senegal.
Stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. But let's begin in Senegal this afternoon, where President Diomaye Faye on Tuesday launched the Systemic Transformation Project during his first Council of Ministers meeting at the Presidential Palace. Diomaye Faye, in his welcoming address, congratulated the 25 ministers, 5 secretaries of state and members of the government for their appointment. He then asked the team to speed up the implementation of the project by working with precision, diligence and efficiency to the satisfaction of the people and in the best interest of the country. Abdullah Hassan tells us more in this report.
Tuesdays was the first Council of Ministers chaired by Senegal's youngest President Diomaye Faye, inaugurated on April 2nd. Driven by ambition and determined to oversee national growth, Faye insisted on the role and responsibility of his administration, which must always be anchored in respect for the rule of law and the Pan-African values. His major announcement was the launch of Senegal's Systemic Transformation Project, which has 5 components. The first is youth, education, training, entrepreneurship and employment for young people and women. The second is combating the high cost of living and increasing household purchasing power. Modernizing the justice system, good governance and improving the electoral system are cumulatively third on the project, followed by the nation's economic sovereignty and the optimal exploitation of natural resources as the fourth arm. Finally, President Diomaye Faye outlined the fifth element as the consolidation of national unity and solidarity to strengthen the country's security, peace and stability. Per Faye's declaration, Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has until the end of April 2024 to finalize the action plan. The final document will indicate a precise timetable for achieving the set objectives. Reviewing and setting up digital communication, public-private sector partnerships, recruitment and service outreach are all on Sonko's to-do list as he leads Senegal's new government on the mantra of sovereignty and prosperity.
Abdullah Hassan reporting there. In Togo, consultations on the revision of the constitution come to an end this Wednesday. The text is now before Parliament for a second reading. Although it is fiercely contested by the opposition and civil society, the government has been holding talks with various stakeholders since Monday. The opposition, which has boycotted these meetings, is preparing to stage a 3-day demonstration starting this Thursday, despite a ban announced late Tuesday by the government. More details with Francis Boniface.
This Wednesday, the MPs will attempt to meet with the civil society and political representatives to convince them to accept the revision of the constitution adopted by Parliament, which changes the country from a presidential to a parliamentary system. After the consultations, the lawmakers are due to consider the text, which has been sent back by President Faure Gnassingbé for a second reading following a wave of protests from politicians and the general public. On Monday and Tuesday, the MPs deployed to the country's 39 prefectures met with traditional chiefs, youth and women organizations and other stakeholders to explain the purpose of the constitutional change and gather their opinions and proposals. The opposition and civil society are up in arms against the constitutional revision, announcing 3 days of demonstrations starting tomorrow despite a ban. Brigitte Ajamabo Johnson is the Secretary General of the Opposition African People's Democratic Convention.
We don't need a regime change in Togo. It's not about being able to implement the Togo alternative that we are suffering from, but in itself the problem we are facing. Since we have our campaign teams that are already on the ground and ready, we will put them to work for this demonstration so that it can cover all of Togo. We are determined. We don't make omelets without cutting them.
Last week, several opposition figures were arrested during a campaign of exchange with the population on the danger of the constitutional revision.
Francis Boniface filed that report. The government of Ghana and Guinea-Bissau have announced the inauguration of a permanent joint commission for cooperation and development for the two countries. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo expressed confidence the two countries will work their modalities for the implementation of the agreements reached following the talks. From Accra, WADR's Nadide Tete report.
The announcement was made when the president of Guinea-Bissau, Umaru Sissoco Embalo, paid a courtesy call on President Akufo-Addo at the Jubilee House as part of his 3-day visit to Ghana. Speaking to the press, President Akufo-Addo established that the concept of a joint committee had already been agreed upon and that the cooperation will aid in addressing issues facing investments and trade.
I'm happy to inform you that President Embalo and I have agreed to convene in the course of this year the inaugural session of the Permanent Joint Commission for Cooperation between our two countries. The Commission will provide the legal and institutional framework for addressing the trade and investment concerns of our two countries.
Guinea-Bissau President Umaru Sissoco Embalo also said that the purpose behind his visit is geared towards deepening his country's bilateral relations with Ghana and in all areas of common interest.
I am here to reiterate our conviction that together we will working hand by hand in the spirit of brotherhood, complementary and solidarity, we can achieve many important objectives.
He further assured that his country would continue to share in many important fields like education, technology, agriculture, economy and finance, as well as defense and security, as he supported Ghana's call for the establishment of strong financial institutions in Africa, especially African Central Bank, an African Investment Bank, an African Monetary Fund, and Pan-African Insurance Agency.
We in West Africa and Sahel in particular are facing many challenges, fighting terrorism and drug trafficking. Promoting democracy and good governance are among the most important ones. We will surely continue to work together with ECOWAS and the African Union to promote more accountability, efficiency and result by implementing necessary reforms.
For WADR, Nadide Tete, Accra.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Elsewhere in Liberia, the Center for Transparency and Accountability CENTAL has welcomed the passage of a joint resolution for the establishment of a War and Economic Crimes Court. On Tuesday, the Liberian Senate concurred with the House of Representatives after 28 out of 30 senators signed the resolution. When established, the tribunal is expected to prosecute perpetrators of crimes against civilians during Liberia's civil war, which killed over 250,000 people. CENTAL is a member of a coalition of civil society organizations for the establishment of War and Economic Crimes Court and wants the Liberian government to effectively implement the decision taken by the legislature. Anderson Miamen is Executive Director of CENTAL.
This is a welcoming development. It has been making for some time now. As you are aware, it is a initial win for accountability in Liberia, especially for the excesses that have been committed over the period, especially during the civil crisis. So it's a good thing that this is happening. We can only hope that the government will act working alongside the rest of the other stakeholders, civil society included, so that we consummate that process we can bring finality to some of the issues that are still lingering after many years of war. It means a whole lot. The fact that our leaders are not just talking, but then they're taking practical actions to ensure that there is accountability for the crimes that were committed in the past. It means it's welcoming. It's a good thing. Reconciliation is important, but we need to hold people accountable for the things they did. So this can only help to strengthen the culture of accountability in Liberia, the democracy that we're opting for. Is also going to help with the whole issue of good governance. Because, mind you, we're talking about economic crimes here. Crimes have been committed, economic crimes, war crimes have been. So by this action, it means that those who participated very actively and played key roles during the war stand to be investigated and, where possible, prosecuted.
Anderson Miamen is Executive Director of Center, where we'll be discussing more on this in the course of the bulletin. Now, the Nigerian Anti-Graft Agency says it has recovered a huge sum of money from a corruption case involving the suspended minister, Betta Edu. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in its publication, confirms the recovery of 30 billion naira, equivalent to $24 million in the scandal that stunned the Nigerian Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation in January this year. WDR's Usman Omar in Abuja has a report.
EFCC's disclosure is the result of an investigation ordered by President Bola Tinubu following the suspension of Betta Edu as Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. Edu, 37, was in January removed from office over alleged diversion of $640,000 of public money into a personal account. She had at the time denied any wrongdoing with a statement from her office explaining that the minister approved the transfer to an account not in her name but for payment of grants to vulnerable groups. However, 6 weeks into the probe, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission said it has found many angles to examine the case after it traced funds from the ministry to over 50 accounts. According to the Commission's chairman, Ola Olukoyede, EFCC is investigating the bank accounts. That's a big deal, Olukoyede said in the latest edition of the agency's monthly e-magazine, EFCC Alert, while urging Nigerians to give the agency time to complete its examination. Ola Olukoyede assured that the recovered funds were already in the coffers of the federal government. Betta Edu is the first cabinet member of the Tinubu administration to be suspended for alleged corrupt practices. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
And to some financial news now, Cote d'Ivoire has received more than $500 million in grants from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. This is a new tranche of funding following an agreement between the global financial institution and the Ivorian authorities. With these funds, Abidjan intends to pursue its socio-economic development. Sanklo Janko has the rest of the details.
The International Monetary Fund has announced that it will pay $574 million to the Ivorian government. This is the second installment of an economic aid program totaling $3.5 billion. It is also the first tranche of the IMF's program to help emerging countries make the transition to a low-carbon economy. However, Cote d'Ivoire must carry out structural reforms to strengthen public finance management and improve the business climate to develop more inclusive growth led by the private sector. Cote d'Ivoire will have to raise taxes. This $1.3 billion financing program was finalized in mid-February. It comes under the Resilience and Sustainability Fund, which enables the IMF to grant long-term loans with deferred repayment so that beneficiary countries can finance the investments needed to adapt to the effects of global warming and prepare for their transition. Cote d'Ivoire, which has been enjoying good growth for more than 10 years, is expected to achieve economic growth of 6.6% in 2024, according to the IMF.
Sankli Janko filed that report. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and our partner stations across the sub-region. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegalese President Diomaye Faye unveils a 5-point action plan by his government to begin economic inventory. Togolese members of parliament conclude their nationwide tour on constitutional amendment consultations despite criticisms. CSOs in Liberia calls for the speedy implementation of the War Crimes Court resolution. And still ahead, Gambia's President Barrow urges unity and development in aid message to citizens. We do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on WADR.org, YouTube, and Facebook. Mali celebrated Eid al-Fitr on Tuesday, marking the end of Ramadan. The president of the transition, Colonel Assimi Goïta, took the opportunity to invite Malians to rally around the inter-Malian dialogue. President Goïta also praised the resilience of his fellow citizens in the face of the current challenges facing the country, notably the energy crisis. Augustine Kuli has more details.
Since the assassination attempt on the president of the transition at the Grand Mosque in Bamako during the Tabaski holiday in 2022, he has been praying in the president's banquet hall during the two major Muslim holidays. For this feast of Ramadan, in the context of load shedding that the country has been experiencing for 5 months, Colonel Assimi Goïta was keen to salute the resilience of his compatriots in the face of this energy crisis. The president of the transition also called for mobilization to ensure the success of the inter-Malayan dialogue in the name of reconciliation and peace. As a reminder, the national phase of the inter-Malayan dialogue will be held next May. Consultations with the nation's stakeholders began last week.
Augustine Kuli filed a report. Well, as Muslims world over celebrate Eid al-Fitr, which marks the end of Ramadan fast, the Gambian President Adama Barrow has stressed the significance of harmony and progress in his pre-Eid address to the nation. President Barrow highlighted the importance of democracy and regional stability, commending Senegal for its peaceful presidential election and power transfer. Barrow also addressed ongoing wars and conflicts, underscoring the necessity of preserving peace and stability in the face of adversity.
There are many ongoing conflicts and wars in various parts of the world, leading to widespread loss of life and huge destruction of infrastructure and property. Innocent children, women, and men are unjustly killed by the day due to intolerance and mere hatred. The Israel war on Palestine provides typical examples of such grave crimes. It is sad that while we are fasting during the holy month, Palestinian Muslims could not do so in peace. Within the ECOWAS sub-region, the adverse economic realities resulting from the global crisis and the internal political tensions in our nations still remain relentless. Undue hostilities and social divisions characterize the sub-region because of the urge for personal gain. People fight for political advantage, not to build better communities and nations, but for personal interests. The outcome is the existing state of instability and insecurity that threaten us all. Notwithstanding the threats, it is comforting that democracy continues to thrive. We have demonstrated it here in the Gambia, and the sister republic of Senegal has remarkably preserved its political image as a democratic model on the African continent.
The Gambia's President Adama Barrow speaking there. The European Union Home Affairs Commissioner Ylva Johansson on Tuesday expressed a worry that last year's coup in Niger could bring about a surge in irregular arrivals to the Union. The military junta that seized power in Niamey in a 2023 coup has since revoked a law that had helped reduce the flow of West Africans to Europe. The EU is seeking closer cooperation with African states to reduce unwanted immigration. David Vincent completes the story.
EU Home Affairs Commissioner Johansson told reporters that the coup in Niger concerns her a lot, adding that it could lead to a lot of new migrants coming in a very difficult and dangerous situation. More than 45,500 people have entered the European Union so far this year, outside of regular border crossings, UN data showed. Such arrivals are way below the 2015 peak, when more than 1 million people, mostly Syrian refugees, reached the bloc. The 27-nation European Union has since been pushing to reduce irregular immigration from the Middle East and Africa. by tightening borders and restricting its asylum laws as anti-immigration rhetoric rose across the continent. Under pressure from far-right parties expected to gain ground in a European Parliament election in 2 months, the EU cast a new migration pact sealed late last year as a breakthrough to handle migration better. The European Parliament will hold a final vote on Wednesday on that package, which shortened times for screening and asylum procedures, seeking to streamline returns as well as laying out aid available to member states under pressure. If approved, it would be rubber-stamped in the coming days by member states that will then have 2 years to implement it.
David Vincent filed that report.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
And as part of the news, we take you back to Liberia, where the joint resolution for the establishment of a war and economic crimes court is dominating this cause. Civil society organizations in the country, including the Center for Transparency and Accountability Center, have welcomed the passage of this resolution. On Tuesday, the Liberian Senate concurred with the House of Representatives after 28 out of 30 senators signed the resolution. When established, the tribunal is expected to prosecute perpetrators of crimes against civilians during Liberia's civil war. Our guest is Anderson Miamin, the Executive Director of CENTAL. CENTAL is a member of the Coalition of Civil Society Organizations for the establishment of War and Economic Crimes Court, and they want the Liberian government to effectively implement the decision taken by the legislature.
It means a whole lot. The fact that our leaders are not just talking, but then they're taking practical actions to ensure that there is accountability for the crimes that were committed in the past. It means it's welcoming. It's a good thing. Reconciliation is important, but we need to hold people accountable for the things they did. So this can only help to strengthen the culture of accountability in Liberia. The democracy that we're opting for is also going to help with the whole issue of good governance. Because, mind you, we're talking about economic crimes here. Crimes have been committed, economic crimes, war crimes. So by this action, it means that those who participated very actively and played key roles during the war stand to be investigated and, where possible, prosecuted. But then not just those who took arms, those who also engaged into economic crimes will be investigated and made to account for their actions. So this is welcoming, this is laudable, we're happy, and we can only hope that this process is consummated as soon as possible for that process of full accountability to begin.
Others are reiterating that this resolution for the establishment of War and Economic Crimes Court could just worsen the current division experienced in the country during the 2023 election, where the current president won narrowly. What does CENTAL say about this?
Sometimes people misconstrue these things, or we believe that holding people to account will help to foster the whole issue of reconciliation in a way. Of course, yes, there might be people who think otherwise about the process, but the reality is that there are a lot more people who are opting for this, who want to ensure that people are held accountable for the things they did during and after the civil crisis, or even before. So yes, there might be concerns here and there about the peace of the country, all of that, but I mean, those points are not very strong enough. What's going to happen after this will be a process that ensures that the victims, in a way, face the accused, and at the end of the day, we're all going to be proud of, for the most part, the things that were happening in terms of people being accountable or held accountable for the excesses they committed. So we don't really buy into that argument about division and all of that. Political processes come with some of these things after elections. Some of the very chaotic situations we saw during the campaigns no longer exist.
Another important aspect of this process is the political will of the government to fast-track it. How do you see that?
We believe that we're making some strides moving forward. We weren't at this point 2 years ago, so that we are even at a point whereby members of parliament are coming together to make a decision on this is welcoming. I mean, you might have a point there. Some of the players might not be doing this with their whole heart and all of that, but it would then depend on what the media does. It would then depend on what civil society does. It would then depend on what citizens do. So we have to play our part to ensure that we hold these people accountable for the actions they've taken, the initial actions they've taken, so that the rest of the other parties to accompany this to make sure that the whole process is consummated can happen.
One of those who stands accused of committing atrocities during the Civil War is a senator of Nimba County, Prince Johnson, who was also seen signing the resolution.
I think it's a good thing that he signed onto it, because the whole process is not about him. There are many more people who participated in the war. There are many more people who committed economic crimes. So the whole process is not about an individual. It is for the country in general.
Anderson Miamen is Executive Director of Central Liberia. And in sport news, let's begin with tennis, as world number one Novak Djokovic said his feeling was great as he flew past Roman Safulin in straight sets at the Monte Carlo Masters on Tuesday after third seed Carlos Alcaraz withdrew from the event due to injury. After receiving a bye in the first round, Djokovic was imperious on the main arena third quarter as he won 6-1, 6-2 against the unseeded Russian. The Serb needed just 1 hour and 10 minutes to make a return to winning ways in his first match since a shock early exit at Indian Wells to Italian Luca Nardi. The 36-year-old became the oldest world number one in the history of the ATP rankings when he took to the court in Monte Carlo, surpassing Roger Federer's record. And in football, the Super Falcons have qualified for the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. Nigeria beat South Africa 1-0 on aggregate to reach the Summer Olympics. Rashidat Ajibade scored from the spot in the first leg of the qualifiers in Abuja on Friday. That goal was enough for the Super Falcons to pick one of Africa's tickets for the women's football event of the Paris Olympics, as the second leg tie ended goalless in South Africa. The last time Nigeria Super Falcons reached the Olympics was 16 years ago. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Christian Mukudi and David Vincent for the technical assistance. Let's keep the conversation coming on our social media platforms: X, formerly Twitter, Instagram @WADR News, and Facebook West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship gender program 50-50 with Nadide Tete. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via